Man, looking forward to a good show today. We're gonna be talking about a lot of stuff. If we get to it, depends. But I hope we get into some good conversation. Midterm madness, moms for liberty. And our communities and how all this stuff ties in when we come back on the other side. Go. Oh man. Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. Our audio and everything is working today. We will still be updating. We still gonna be making that happen because we want to keep it fresh and tight for you all and make sure that y'all got some new hotness. But for now, we are using our traditional platform. And I am Charles. That's David. Hopefully our third will be joining us soon, but he may be on the road. It's crazy days right now. But David Castillo, how are you today, brother?
Dr. Cole, thank you. I'm doing well. It's good to be here. Thanks to everybody that is tuning in and that will tune in to the South Star Classroom. This is our 70th episode. So make sure that you like and share. We want to make sure it's an interactive show today. We're going to be talking about some really important stuff around the elections and the midterms. But we also want to hear your voice and like what your questions are and your thoughts on what went down on Tuesday. But yeah, things are good. I voted on Tuesday. I always have this practice of, taking my mail-in ballot to the local post office or library and hand delivering it. I used to vote in person. I just don't do it anymore. But I still like the tradition of doing it on the election day. And so maybe that's why they're so late in counting these ballots, because people are still dropping them off on the day of. But other than that, yeah, good to be here. I will say, last week, due to our technical difficulties, we obviously had to cut the show very short, which is fine. These things happen. It's like Elon Musk buying Twitter and totally messing the whole thing up, right? So we we're not going to test.
I'm rooting for you, Elon. I'm rooting for you, baby. I got me a bought and paid for check mark, baby. We out here.
That's it. I got three check marks. And so I missed the show. I mean, we'll get the tech stuff right for the new platform, but I was thinking after we cut loose on last Friday, I was like, you know what? I had some stuff to say and I missed not having the podcast on Friday. So that's a good thing. That means this is for me, it's like a good end of the week processing, connecting opportunity. And I was hurting a little bit last Friday, Dr. Cole.
Man, well, one, and I've been saying this both here and on A Black Hands. I'm gonna say you should have wrote it. You should have wrote it after that to still get it out. I used to write every single week and publish every week, and I have to get back to that. It's just been busy and it's like if you don't do it, it's hard to get that muscle. So I got to get back into the process of just doing that. I'm very happy Nasir came out. I'm a huge Nas fan. Nas is my favorite rapper. I've said this before. My 5 changes, but Nas, Jay-Z, Andre 3000. It kind of goes back and forth and vacillates between Lupe Fiasco, DMX. I love Lauryn Hill. There's just a few people, but Nas is an album. I've had it on since this morning, and it is just we were talking about this off camera. I just loved his growth and how he's maturing and still kind of going, and it's been pretty cool. And I see our third down there, so I'm gonna bring him in. But it's been really cool, man, and I've loved it. I got to vote for the first time. I vote every cycle, and I bought my house in the South, Chicago suburbs about 3 years ago. But I just left my Oakland place, so I was always still voting in Oakland. I was still a D3 Oakland voter because I felt like my vote was needed there. So this was my first time voting in Chicagoland, and let me just tell you, man, there's something about being in an all-black area, neighborhood, community, and you go out there and you see these little old black ladies, and you see I think Zeta Phi Beta sorority, which is a black sorority out there, like, you know, making sure people know where to go, giving voter just packets to like for masks, because we got a lot of older people, man. It was just something. Going to vote in this last election felt like a grandmother hugging you and like fixing you cocoa. Like, it was just such a sweet, adorable like process where I was at, and it was, you know, I went with the early crowd, so you know it was mostly just elderly people, man. Like, and they were just so sweet and like so nice, so and so welcoming. So we'll see. We are our races weren't as controversial. We kind of knew where things were kind of heading. Our local stuff is, we have a very engaged older electorate, so it's going to be very interesting and it was good hearing those people. But
cool.
Yeah, man,
you know,
talk.
I voted also in a different place for the first time in probably 25 years. So I used to vote in the Bay Area, and then for the last 15 years in Oakland specifically. And you know, the experience there, not necessarily the act of voting, but like what you're voting on and the kinds of politicians, their backgrounds. You know, you're pretty much looking at voting for a like bureaucrat robot establishment Democrat or a left-wing communist socialist. You're like, what am I going to choose?
Right
now, I live in a different community where you actually get you get some choice. You get some of that, but you know, there's some Republicans on the ballot. It feels a little more balanced, and that's like the first time I've experienced. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of I mean, I don't have to vote for them, but like they're there. But that was a reflection for me just voting now in this new region that we're at. You know, you get out of that like that Bay Area, East Bay like bubble that you become so used to. You know, you're like, there's a whole world out there.
Right. And before we introduce this dapper guy who just, not only did he come, see, he couldn't just be late. He had to come late and step in like, you know what I'm saying? You know, like a model in this joint. You feel me? So we gonna go to him in a minute. You know, as a matter of fact, he said,
you know, I'm offended, man. I'm offended
like that. Let's get him off,
man.
For us real quick. You know what I'm saying? But I just want to make this last point. You know what you just remind me of? Aside from the years I was at Cal State Hayward, right? Aside from the years I was at Cal State Hayward living on campus.
Yep.
I have only voted as an Oakland voter my entire adult life. This is the first time that I've not, you know, outside of, like I said, my college years. So it's really interesting, man. It's really interesting. But without further ado, I want to bring in and welcome, you know,
Dapper Dan.
You might know him as Omar Yanar. I call him the man with the blackest hair in the world, supermodel brother out here. You know what I'm saying? And he is about to hit the fashion runway right after we finish today's show. So we have to finish on time because he's flying to Milan.
Yeah.
Omar Yanar, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, brother?
That is the greatest introduction of all time, man. That was not only the most beautiful introduction, but it was like the most long-winded introduction of all. This man with the black hair.
I was gonna keep going. I was gonna try to hit 3 minutes. You know what I mean?
I'm wearing my Pendleton, like celebrating Happy Veteranos Day, the Cholos, and this guy here is like, you know, look at him.
You know, I'm wearing my hip hop attire. You know what I'm saying? He's flying to Italy after this. It's okay.
Straight up. So I got a couple of things for you, gentlemen. One, I was hosting with my administrative staff an executive management workshop today. Why do I bring that up? Because, ladies and gentlemen, as always, the South Star Classroom, we're not just a podcast. We are a consulting firm. And in fact, a consulting firm that's going to get started on a book within the next few weeks. Woo-hoo. So, ladies and gentlemen, be looking out, man, because we're going to change the game educationally in this country, not just by talking and not just by writing, but by coming in and consulting you and your school districts on practices that we have not only talked about on this podcast, not only done the research on, but have implemented in our own schools with fidelity. So today was just another day of doing that work and be like, we can do that work for you. Importantly, hey, happy Veterans Day, everybody.
Oh, yes, man. My brother, my
Big
uncle,
shout out.
my father, my brother's army. My father is in my brother's army, 2 tours Iraq, 1 Afghanistan. My father is Marine, my uncle is Marine, Vietnam, and a bunch of cousins that's in various different different wings of the service. So happy Veterans Day. I don't know, are y'all military brats like I am, or
Mr.
Yeah,
Knowledge,
I'm not.
Mr. Castillo?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have most of my uncles have served, but my father did not serve. He had an eyesight issue, so he wasn't able to pass the test, which is an authentic eyesight issue, unlike 45's like broken, damaged bones in his feet, right? But my uncles all served Marines, Korea, Vietnam, and then cousins having served in more recent conflicts. So yeah, lots of military in the family.
Yeah, man.
Right on, man. Yeah, none in the immediate family. Both my parents are immigrants. So my dad, from Mexico, like by the time that he, completed his immigration and got everything done, like the man was like, 40 something years old, and it was 1980 something. So, interestingly enough, he lived through World War II and everything else, but he was in Mexico at the time. But the proximity to the troops in El Paso was something that he talked about a lot. My grandfather fought in World War II. He had very interesting things to say about the Japanese, and very disparaging things to say about my Japanese car at one time. And then my uncles did Vietnam, Korean War, all the things. But El Paso is a very, 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 very large military town. So Fort Bliss is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, military base in the country. It's located here in El Paso. So Veterans Day is a big deal. I mean, I was just with my staff, and other than the Coast Guard, which makes sense because how are we going to have a Coast Guard in El Paso? Every other branch was in the house. National Reserve, even though that's not a branch, was represented. Military in terms of Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force as well. So we had everybody in the house today. So big shout out to our veterans and their acts of service for this country. Today's your day. So thank you.
Well, you want to hear something interesting that I didn't know?
I do want to hear something interesting.
I'll make it quick. Just and as my brother, so I'd always assumed that my uncle, got drafted because he just is from that era, to go and like who chooses to go to Vietnam. And then my brother was like, nah, man, it was a lot of like black people that like chose, like things were like bad here and there was poverty and didn't have a lot of opportunities. Like a lot of people chose. He was like, ask Unc when you get a chance. And I asked, and I called on my uncle. It was like last year. And I was like, Uncle Skipper, were you drafted or did you choose to go to like one of the grimiest wars of all time? He was like, no, I fought to get in. Like I wanted to get in, and it was just different over there. And there was a lot of, he came back with a lot of issues, man. It's a longer conversation for a different day. But when he talked about his experience as a black man in Chicago during that time, and then going over to Vietnam and the way he was treated and welcomed and a lot of other things that was happening. I mean, it was a really wild story, and it was like enlightening and sad. It was a lot of different emotions at once. So, but I did not know that folks were just like, I know a lot of people were afraid they were going to get drafted, but I did not know there were so many black men that were like, no, there's nothing here for me. I want to go over there. And he would have stayed longer if he could have, according to him. Didn't know. Anyway,
that's the story of many of my. That's the story of many of my uncles too. They volunteered. It was a way out of. It was a way to move up both individually and as a family. The military for the generation of my parents was a pathway to the middle class. Which without they wouldn't have had. So that's it's a great topic. Yeah.
Man,
Indeed.
It's all good, man. Well,
it's processing that, man. Just processing that, man, because like it's we thank the veterans for their incredible service, but it's like it comes back to black and brown in terms of like a lot of black and brown folks chose to fight for this country, chose to serve this country, but also just chose this circumstance. And as dire, can you imagine? And this is what we get into with education, how dire the circumstances in their community must have been that they chose Vietnam over what was going on at that time for black and brown folks, man. So
Yeah,
it all comes
Yeah.
back to why we do this podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
Man, it's
I heard
crazy.
you all snapping out your top 5. He goes Reggie, Jay-Z, Tupac, Biggie, Andre from Outkast, Generals, Nas, and Vinny. Who the hell's
Eminem would
Vinny?
appreciate.
Who's
Eminem
Vinny?
would definitely appreciate that just now, brother.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite verses from him. But I just was saying it because we were talking about the Nas album, and I
Yes.
love Nas, and it's been like a holiday for me. But you can give us your top 5, and then we'll throw it to David is leading us in the conversation today. So I would love to get that top 5. He's
my top
that's
5?
our resident DJ.
Good. All
That's
right, I got
DJ
my
David
top
down
5.
there.
Biggie and Tupac absolutely have to be in my top 5. I grew up in the 90s. Tribe Called Quest.
Okay.
Absolutely 100% in my top 5 hip hop artists of all time. N is absolutely up there. And then number 1, MC Hammer.
Listen, man.
Bay Area.
Did you see Doc? Doc was like,
No. Listen,
Hey, man.
I would never disrespect MC Hammer. Listen, he wasn't my favorite rapper, but I know MC Hammer. I like Hammer is like really involved in like education and like choice. Like Hammer is like Hammer is like I don't know if he's involved in choice as much, but Hammer is like still he's an OG, man. And like, listen, people like to call Hammer corny and all that stuff and say what you want about his music, but Hammer ain't somebody in them streets that people would just mess with, man. He is very, very, very well connected and respected. And he went broke trying to take care of all these people. So I always got respect for Hammer, man. He loves his city and his people.
No, man, I love Hammer. Actually, it's and this may surprise all of you. My favorite group of all time is Digital Underground. So like Shock G and Money B were 2 of my absolute favorite rappers and hip hop artists of all time. But honorable mention is your Method Man, all your Wu-Tang Clan folks. Method was always my favorite. But Nas is that guy that I think has consistently been changing the game. Like Jay-Z, I think lyrically is him and Eminem are uncomparable. Like the level of intelligence of Jay-Z's lyrics are incredible. I think for me, it's the production of his rap. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. But, I like other production better than I do that. But you can't hold a candle to that. Nas is someone who's consistently just been changing the game. I think he's just like the unparalleled game changer. So you got to give massive respect to Nas.
He is aging so gracefully. The album is beautiful.
Insane how good he is too, man.
Cinematic album, and I love it. I don't know why I just froze because I'm hardwired in. But David, we have taken way too long in the introduction.
Yeah. Someone just says Nas is above the GOAT status. I'm like, that's exactly right.
I agree.
You can't put him in the top 5. He's just transcended, man.
I agree.
Exactly
I agree.
Right.
So where are we going today, David?
Nas gets a free blue check mark for life. Okay.
How apropos.
Today we are talking about the recent midterm elections that just went down on Tuesday. And I recall, I always remember the voting cycles, like every 2-year midterm, presidential, it's like that's how it goes. I can't necessarily recall. I think in the last like several cycles of midterms, there's just been a really heightened awareness and interest and funding and campaigning, and especially for this one too. The stakes feel like they're very high, and indeed they are. But we wanted to take the time on today's show, now that the election's been a couple of days and still some of the results are not in, but wanted to create a space to talk about everything from the big national implications, like what's happening in the House, in the Senate. We want to talk about a couple of different particular regions that you all might have top of mind. I know a lot went down in Texas. And then, let's go down to the level of not that the big, national and big state elections don't matter, but local elections matter too. And I think that's something that a lot of people have woken up to. So let's also drill down on a couple of regions. Let's talk about school boards, the implications there. There's been a lot of activity. Nobody used to care about school boards. It was always this thing that's like, hey, I used to be the dog catcher. I'm going to run for school board. Yeah, you're a nice guy. And then you would get elected to school board. And now that game has definitely changed as a result of many factors. And so with that, let's get into it. I think starting with the national picture, we know, and also, just for everybody that's watching, I don't have to remind, I will remind, let's put this down again so people really understand how these things work. Our federal government is made up of three branches, right? The executive, the legislative, which is the Congress, the House and the Senate, and then the judicial, which is the Supreme Court. What we are talking about today at the national level is both the Senate and the House of Representatives, where we're seeing a lot of movement and possibly the changing of hands from Democrat to Republican, primarily in the House of Representatives. That's what it's looking like. So, like, what are the implications there? You go from like a Democrat-controlled House, a Democrat-controlled Senate, and a Democrat-controlled White House. Now it looks like that is about to change. And, there've been some very interesting, results there. It looks like it was, in general, not the bloodbath that we expected on, against, Democrats. Looks like Democrats held ground. But I think at that national level, I wanted to hear your thoughts. Like, what are your thoughts on what's happening or what has happened at the congressional level? Yeah, there you go. There's a good one. I mean, Fetterman and Oz, what's happening in Georgia. A lot of really interesting results have come down. So, like, what are your big takeaways? Like, what have you seen? What are some races that you want to like focus on and reflect on? And we'll jump to
Omar got it. Yeah, Omar got it.
Go ahead. What are you seeing, my friend?
I mean, I did not mean that woo to jump in. I meant that woo because damn.
Even the governor races, you had an election.
I want to jump into that in a second.
Yeah.
So, I do want to jump into the overall governor thing. Overall, really, really solid feedback. I think for our audience, like, I don't want to make any assumptions. You are probably extraordinarily well-versed people on politics and politics 101, but just a bit of like basic stuff. Yes, you got your three branches. This is a midterm election. So what happens in a midterm election, ladies and gentlemen, is like most people don't come out and vote in a midterm election.
Yeah.
So voter turnout is significantly less. And usually, ladies and gentlemen, what happens in a midterm election is that the party of the president, in this case, it being a Democrat, the opposite party usually gains a lot of traction. So whoever is in the presidency, the opposite party during the midterm election usually gains a lot of traction. So a very big example of that was 1992. Bill Clinton was the president. By 1994, everything switched. So the House and the Senate both went Republican. That's how we got Newt Gingrich as Speaker of the House. That we got the Contract for America. That's how Bill Clinton essentially had like a lame duck presidency. And then what you saw happen recently, when did it switch Democratic? Because Pelosi wound up making that switch recently. I mean, I'd have to go back into my history, but ultimately, what we saw in previous elections was general sentiment that the party not in power in the presidency gains a lot of seats. Now, what we were supposed to see, David, Charles, was the bloodbath. Everyone thought, they called it the red wave. Everyone thought that the Republicans were just going to whoop everyone's behind. By the way, and this
I thought
is
it was
my
a tsunami.
new addition.
I thought it was going to be a red tsunami.
It was like, I mean, everyone had their wonderfully like well-written metaphors. It was gonna be the bloodbath. It was gonna be the bloodbath, like Game of Thrones. It was gonna be the wave. I did too.
Yeah.
The one factor, and I was telling a group of friends this, I was like, it was gonna be a bloodbath. The one factor that I was telling them, and I was having this conversation of all places at this famous bar in Georgetown. Called the, oh my God, am I forgetting the name of it already? I'll figure it out in a second. Called the Crew, or I'll remember in a minute. It's where St. Elmo's Fire was based off, the famous bar for politics. And I was having that conversation with them weeks and weeks ago. And I was like, the Democratic Party better thank their behind about that Roe v. Wade thing, because that essentially turned the tide of this entire election.
Yeah.
And everyone thought that was bullshit. Everyone thought I was like, oh my, that's not going to make a difference. And I'm like, just wait for it. Because you're expecting a bloodbath, and I guarantee you, you're going to see some very interesting results. And it not only wasn't a bloodbath, but for example, 2 governors have switched, meaning you had 2 states that literally went from a Republican governor to a Democratic governor in a midterm election. So having the party not in power gain seats in gubernatorial election is insane.
And
That's
what states are those for our listeners?
The two seats that flipped. Give me a minute, because it's not New Mexico and it's not Kansas. Maryland, I think, was one of them that flipped, and we got our first black mayor.
Yeah.
Excuse me, not mayor. First black governor of Maryland, right? And then give me a minute, and I'll figure out the other seat that flipped.
Okay. Yep.
Because I kept thinking it was Kansas, but she won re-election. So I will get you that in a second. So that's my hot take. I could keep going, but I want to give Charles the floor.
No, you can keep going. Go ahead. I'm trying to pull up something for my piece. So go ahead. Let it breathe.
Okay. All right. So maybe David, you can look up on the Googles which 2 seats changed. Yep. But essentially, here's why this is important. Usually, guys, when a midterm election happens and you have a radical shift in power, as David was saying, the House, when they have a new power structure and Republicans take over the House, you have no idea how big that is. You have no idea how powerful that is. What happens that you all may not know is that when the party changes, like it may in the House, where it goes from Democrat to Republican, not only does the Speaker of the House change. So you go from a Democratic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, to a Republican Speaker of the House. I'm forgetting who's the minority leader right now that would take the speakership. I think it's Kurt something, but could be wrong. Here's where the rubber hits the road, ladies and gentlemen. Every committee, this is, if you remember, like how a bill becomes a law, like Schoolhouse Rocks. Every committee, now the committee chair becomes a Republican instead of a Democrat, which means that any committee now is led by a Republican, which means that any law that any Democrat decides to bring up, a committee member can kill it. That's how much power committee chairs have. They can just instantaneously kill a bill. And when it's a party, like, look, whatever your political affiliation is, I'm not going to try to make this about Republicans versus Democrat versus just a 101. If you happen to be a Democrat, this is probably not a good thing, because now that committee can kill that bill. So even if like the Democrats control the Senate and they pass a bill, that bill has to go to the House. And it goes under what's called reconciliation. And there's a whole reconciliation committee, meaning, hey, you got your bill, we got our bill, and we're reconciling the differences. That's when they have 2 bills. Senate decides to pass something and it goes to the House, it goes to that committee. And if that committee chair is like, I'm not having that, dead on arrival. So this is the power that switching parties have. It's also the power of midterm elections. Sadly, they don't have the voter turnout that we'd like for them to have, because I don't think Americans understand the insane stakes of the midterm elections. What does it mean to have a different party in control? What does it mean to elect your House of Representative member? What does it mean to elect your senator? What does it mean to elect your governor? So what we saw generally, David, was not the massive bloodbath that we all expected, which for Democrats is a wonderful thing, but also a massive statement in political science. 1, Roe v. Wade had a massive impact on this election. 2, I think Trump, like, yo, man, like, I think this was an interesting indicator to be that Trump's pull was probably a negative versus a positive. The overwhelming majority of candidates that were supported and endorsed by Trump lost. And I think you're starting to see a bit of a, look, I want to get hopeful and say we're starting to see the like thread unraveling, but like that dude has got a way of coming back into the damn zeitgeist and making himself popular again. Although I will say his feud with DeSantis was hysterical, because as you all know, Ron DeSantis kicked the shit out of everybody in Florida,
Yep.
and I mean won decisively.
It was a bloodbath.
And
That was a bloodbath.
Something that's interesting with the situation in Florida, beyond the feud that DeSantis is having with Trump, is that this is one of the first times that we've seen a governor, who obviously was reelected, endorse down to the level of school board candidates. DeSantis endorsed 30 school board candidates, right? Not just, by letting them put his name on their materials or with IEs or PACs or whatever, but actually put out a formal press release, talked about it. Governors don't normally get involved in the level of what should be nonpartisan school board races. So that's something that's definitely changing, and something that we got to pay attention to, because we might end up seeing more of it. It's just, there's such a big I mean, that's really where, if you think of a governor or a senator, or these like the A team, right? The farm teams are the school boards. This is where people start they get their political chops. They get elected to the school board, and then they move through the party. They move up as long as they're winning elections. And so now we're seeing that connection, at least in Florida, between this very powerful governor, who is more than likely going to run for president, and he's actually paying attention to like local school board races. So
yeah, man, I think that they have an interesting power play, and I think that this is going to cause a shift. I think Trump hasn't fully given up, but I think you're going to see DeSantis really start hitting Trump a little bit more. Start like kind of, there's been a recalibration of this kind of, think about the morphing from the Tea Party to Trump Republicans to now DeSantis time. I think it's going to be a very interesting shift. They've had a lot of movement, so we'll see, man. I think that dude is sitting pretty. I know Chris talks about this on A Black Hands. I don't necessarily want this, but I think that a lot of people are expecting a Gavin Newsom, DeSantis kind of showdown. I don't think that Biden is leaving. I don't think he's gonna. Listen, as a Democrat, as a lifelong Democrat, as somebody who's critical of his party, or whatnot, but I think this was helpful for Biden, a little bit more helpful than I think people were expecting. But I do think that there is still a large contingent of the Democratic Party that want to see him be primaried, and with somebody like a Gavin, just because DeSantis is coming. So we'll see. I think it's going to be really interesting. My takeaway from this weekend has been, well, not this weekend, but from this election has been interesting, right? So I agree with everything that you all said. I saw all that. And then there were just there's just some infighting in my own Black community. And I don't know, there's a whole hashtag about blame Black men. And most of the things around the Twitter sphere, the social media sphere, is around Georgia. Georgia was one of like the top issues. And it's just, with Stacey Abrams not winning the governorship, and then Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker kind of, in this tight race that's going to a runoff. And there were people that called this beforehand. It was like, yo, we're going to blame straight Black men around this. It's going to be their fault. And it's really, I don't know, it's kind of a hurtful thing. And part of that is I'm bringing is
why I don't understand. Why are they blaming?
So it's a lot, man. And I wish I had some Black women on here to have this discussion. So, because I don't want to speak for them, and it's not the majority of Black women or the majority of Black people. It's powerful voices on Twitter that have a lot of reach, and it's kind of like they're not voting for her, they're not showing up for her. It's sexism, is this?
Okay.
But here are the numbers, man. Here's how voting went for Abrams, man, by race. Like, Black men made up 11% of the electorate, and 84% voted for Stacey Abrams, and 93% voted for Stacey Abrams. Like that, if we look at the state, right? Like, this is what I'm saying. There is no other group. There is no other group, right? Like, as a group,
blame white men.
90%. We are like, tell me a stronger voting block. Tell me a more loyal voting block, right? And
I love you brought up the number.
And we're fighting about this. Exactly. And this is why there's been a lot of, see, y'all don't live in this part of Twitter world. And if you've never visited Black Twitter, I suggest you just visit and don't live there. I think you should just stay for a little bit. Don't even stay overnight because it can get turned into a wild place. But when you look at this, it's like, yo, it's a lot of people that on this list that got a whole lot of Black Lives Matter sign and did not get into that booth and vote for your ass. And I think that there's a lot of like white women blame and a lot of white men blame. And then somebody else brought this up, and I've been bringing this up in different ways. When you all came on A Black Hands, I talked about this a little bit. I've talked about it there. I've talked about it here. It's like
crazy.
When we look at our brown brothers and sisters, when we look at our Latino voters, right? There is no, they are automatically going to vote X or Y. Like there are groups that are cut in within, and that makes some of these groups buyers, right? That makes different sects of like that group have to be kind of catered to and ran to and like talked to and engaged with in a different way. And when you got 90% of a voting block for anything, I don't know if that can be powerful if we are on the same page about where that 90% is going to go, right? Like, you know what I mean? And if it's always just going to go blue, and I am a Democrat, I have been a Democrat. I have no intention of becoming a Republican. If anything, it would probably be as an independent. But this is why we don't get people coming and talking to us and campaigning to us and not pandering, right? Like, and so, you know, it's a tough time. It's a tough, because it's hard to discuss. It's hard to discuss in single company, and it's hard to discuss in mixed company. And, you know, you try to stay on code with that. And I have a lot of different feelings and emotions about it, but those are the things that we have been kind of dealing with and looking at. But it is very disingenuous in my book to say Black men are the reason. If every single Black man that was in that election had voted 100% Stacey Abrams, she still would not have had the numbers to win. Georgia is not Atlanta. And I think that is something that, like, you know, that people got to kind of understand and realize, man. And so that's my piece, and we can bring it back to the square. But you know, y'all have something happening, like the thing that happened in LA, right? Like when something happens in your community, and you're like, okay, we got to talk about this. I want to be on my, you know, I want to be here for my people, and I want to be able to tell the truth. And there's some conversations that need to happen behind closed doors that we need to kind of address. And it's a weird dance. So I'm in the midst of that place right now.
Yep. That Georgia data is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia's an interesting place. But thank you for pulling that up. It's good to have a conversation around some actual numbers. So,
indeed. And for all, I'm sure you all know, but right now, like the Democrats are fighting to maintain control of the Senate.
Yeah.
So right now you got 46 Democrats that have been elected or that are slated to be in the Senate, 48 Republicans. Clearly you need 51 for the majority. Now you have other parties. So I think like 2 of them are independent, but they always vote Democratic. So I think like what's his face in Vermont, Bernie Sanders classifies himself as an independent, but votes clearly Democratic. And you've got some races that are a little bit up in the air. So like Arizona is up in the air for the Senate. It hasn't been confirmed yet, Alaska. But the big one, ladies and gentlemen, is Georgia. And if Georgia goes to the Republicans, to Herschel Walker, which by the way, has anyone paid attention to that? Because like, oh man, listen, thank you for your contributions to football. But like, I don't know how the hell you're going to piece a sentence together, least of all do legislation. If he wins, the Senate flips to the Republican side. That's why it's such a huge election. That's why everyone's watching. And by the way, the implications, ladies and gentlemen, that runoff is in December. Expect to see a ton of money.
Oh, it started already. It started already.
Of money,
crazy.
man. Buckets and buckets
both
of money.
ways. Both ways.
So I got some things that I wanna quickly say and then ask you all, because I've got an interesting inquiry about all this. One, it was 2 governors that changed seats. One was Maryland, and that was our first Black governor of Maryland, which is excellent. The second one was Massachusetts. Forgot that they had a Republican governor, and now we have our first openly lesbian female governor, and she's the first governor of Massachusetts, period. Female governor, excuse me. And I'm like,
wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, well, I guess
like
it's not that
Elizabeth
crazy.
Warren,
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, it's nuts because it's like, oh, it's Massachusetts. It's an old state. It's pretty liberal, but like Massachusetts is an interesting state. They'll vacillate a lot. I mean, what's his face? He's now senator from Utah, presidential candidate. Who's a Mormon guy? What's his name? Why am I forgetting
Romney?
names today on the show? Yeah, Romney. Guys, Romney was a Republican governor of Massachusetts. In fact, Obamacare was based off of his plan. It's just funny to me. So those are the two that flipped. I do want to talk about results overall. In Texas, whew, man, that was a bloodbath of a situation. Third time running for a seat, Mr. Robert Francis O'Rourke, who has gained a lot of national. Yeah, man, I'm not going to call him his appropriated Latino name. Thank you for appropriating our culture for your political advantage. Yeah, I said it. I'll continue to say it. I'm not down with that shit. Was in an open bloodbath. I predicted a loss with a point margin of 7 to 10 points. It was a 12-point margin and growing. So Texas, we talk consistently about when that purple thing is going to happen. Everyone is very hopeful about it. Not for a while. Why? Brown people, as you have said, are an unpredictable voting bloc.
Yep.
And while South Texas demonstrated not as heavy a Republican wave as we saw, the Latinos in Texas are looking very, very skeptically about what's going on politically and is massively vacillating on their decisions. And that could have dire implications, ladies and gentlemen, in 2024. Now, look, 2024, Texas is going to vote red as they vote red. But I want to ask you, gentlemen, a question, and it's a legit question. Someone asked me this recently, and I have an answer and I have a response. But we were talking about Biden, and we're talking about what's going to happen in 2024. Like that man was going to, the whole point was for him to run in 2020, win, and then essentially like probably even like bow out midterm. Now he's
fade
having
away,
to stay on.
fade away.
Yeah. Now we're talking about having him run in 2024 because we're worried about Trump or DeSantis. My question, and I already know the answer, but I got to ask you too, why ain't Kamala in that conversation?
I thought that she was supposed to be that. I mean, I thought that was supposed to be, the handoff of the baton. And I don't know what's happened between then and now. I don't know what's happening internally. I don't know what's going on, but
I think with visible. I think with her, it's a couple things. I mean, I think there have been a couple of missteps in terms of, bringing her from the position of the vice presidency up to, kind of moving her into that position where people could see her as president. I think the administration has missed a couple of moves to like put her out in front, right? For whatever reason. I don't know why. And then I think the second piece is, I think racism, right? Black woman. That is definitely always at play. She's a woman, right? And she's got the California tag. So I think, there's something about California and California. I mean, I'm not talking about like the kind of Jerry Brown or like Ronald Reagan type people. Now I'm talking about like modern day California, liberals, Democrats from California. It's a hard sell across the country. Yeah. I mean, and so you've got, Kamala Harris is falling into that. And then, next up is like, if Gavin Newsom runs for president, I think DeSantis clobbers him, and I'll say that right now. So I hope that the Democrats can figure something else out, because I think
it's so funny you say that, David, and don't lose your point, is because me and everybody that I know from California, when his name comes up, we all are kind of like, I don't know, bro. Like, and I don't have nothing against Gavin, but everybody outside of California, like including my brother and friend and a Black Hands co-host, thinks that like they really love this cat. And I'm just like, just when they start digging stuff, when it's like, it's and listen, man, I've met Gavin before. I don't think he's a bad guy or whatnot. I mean, I don't really be judging like that, but it's really interesting that all my California friends that are into politics, we all have an uneasy feel if he becomes the national nominee. And everybody I've talked to outside of this joint that is not a Republican is like, we want that guy. And it's interesting, man.
Yeah. And I think, there's like the political level of it. But for me, at the end of the day, it's how Gavin Newsom not necessarily handled the pandemic, but how he has handled and addressed issues around education in this state. An utter, complete failure, right? And so, like, that alone for me is enough to, like, I didn't vote for him for governor. He won. I knew he was going to win, but I didn't vote for Gavin Newsom, and I wouldn't vote for him for president. But that's
I voted for him. I voted for him. And like I said, I think he's a smart guy. But again, the same. It's the way that like liberals or progressives or the majority of national Democrats would feel about like an Alabama tried and true Republican, like running, right? It's like, listen, an Alabama Republican is different from Republicans the same way that a California liberal is different from liberals. And I think that, or at least that's what people think and what they feel.
Yep.
I mean, it's, but if Biden is going to stay, man, and it's just like, I don't know. I don't know where the party kind of goes from here in that way, right? I think that, and honestly, the fact that it was not a bloodbath, like, is good for. Listen here, let's just get brass tacks. Now we're all poli-sci majors as we were, right? Let's just let's just have.
I want to hear them taxes off.
Yeah, here's the thing. It wasn't a red wave. It wasn't all that, but we still did not comfortably win. We're going to lose control of something. Yeah. All right, there's that. But the way that this can kind of be worse for Democrats is because the sense of urgency in platforming or primarying, challenging Biden, it kind of like he has a case now of like, no, I can still carry this. And people are kind of like, I don't know if people was energized by you or if people were energized by all the stuff that has been happening with Roe v. Wade and like this, democracy being on the ballot was kind of the thing that came out in front. I don't know if people were excited about Biden. You get what I mean? And I don't know what that's going to mean for an election. It's going to be very interesting, man.
I don't think anybody was excited. I don't think many people were excited about Biden. I want to finish off this thing really quick on Gavin Newsom because we do have some comments from Toya about like what are we seeing in California, and then we got Bill Conrad in with the French Laundry comment. So what are we talking about here? I think one of the issues with Gavin Newsom and the way that he kind of comes across to people that know, how he moves as a person and a politician. Like during the pandemic, schools are shut down, right? Mm-hmm. And there was some point mid-pandemic where Gavin Newsom got busted having a dinner with friends and supporters at a very fancy Michelin-rated top restaurant in Napa or Sonoma County called the French Laundry, and they're not wearing masks, right? So we're all wearing masks. We're locked down. We're not talking to our neighbors. We're not seeing our families. And here's Gavin Newsom, golden boy, out, enjoying a nice rack of lamb with probably, some incredible Sangiovese wine, something, nice, good, like dry wine that goes with goat.
With billions in the room.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing is like, we got to keep the schools closed to keep the children safe because people are going to die. Kids are going to die. Teachers are going to die. And you know what? The whole time, his kids were in private school and they were attending in-person school. So the hypocrisy is what I'm getting at. And I just, for me, that's a deal killer, especially with my lens around, issues around education and what I saw as a result of the school shutdowns. I think it's a deal killer for him. So, but we'll see.
Well, but it depends on who is the, I think for us that work in education that are like in these issues, I think that matters to us a little bit more. I would just say this. I was the vice chair of the California Young Dems. I co-founded Black Young Dems East Bay, helped get started Black Young Dems San Francisco. I've been around, the conferences and the parties. I've met Kamala Harris. I've met Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom is a very charming guy. He has a very Gavin Newsom kind of has aspirations of being a Kennedy is how I kind of feel about it a little bit. Like he's he's kind of like that royalty. And then there are some, I'm not a scandals person. He had whatever issue he had, like that's really not my business, but you got that, which would definitely come out. It would absolutely come out in the nastiness of it and all the things involved, which again, I don't care about, you know what I mean? And I think that, but the other thing, you got everything that you just said, David. And then also on our side, Nancy Pelosi, right? They the same thing. Nobody can go outside. You can't do this. You can't do that. I've met her. She was a very nice woman to me as well. You know what I mean? I actually think she is a good leader. I think she's a brick house. I think she is somebody like, she don't really play no games from what I've seen. So I can appreciate that. And I can appreciate the fact that she doesn't care if she's liked. I actually think she's a lot stronger than Gavin Newsom just as a leader. Like Gavin Newsom is vain. Like he actually does. He really does care. Nancy Pelosi don't lie. Just for the people listening, sorry sponsors, Nancy don't give a fuck what you think. Nancy gonna make her bread. She gonna do her thing, and she's like going to. That's who she is. God bless her.
She's a gangster. She's a gangster.
She is a gangster, and she knows her role, right? And she plays that game. And so, but I think that
she's made people disappear, like Hillary Clinton. People they're
I
gone.
will not say that, one, because I want to be here, and two, I cannot deny or confirm that. But I will just say, I think that, you know, if Biden is the person and he's going against DeSantis, I'm gonna do whatever I can to help Biden win, man. That's what I want to see. But I would like to just see this party for once be responsive to what is happening and not just be behind the curve like we always are. We just talked about Republicans have changed their skin. They have changed their idea. They've changed their foundational identity has been the same, but they have been able to morph in the last 20 years like no other. They've been able to go from a centrist leaning Bush conservative to like the Tea Party to like the pro-war people to like then to Trump. Like you have seen these people, and to now the parent and family, you know, Mothers of Liberty, school board election. Like they have been working multi-pronged strategy and winning and succeeding at it for a long time. So I just think that like I don't know if we're gonna keep being able to vacillate. I mean, I hope the brother wins, but it's really interesting. And William Comrade, I mean, you know, I know that David is not the biggest Tony Thurman fan as well.
I'm Bill, not going there today.
But Bill, I would just say this: Tony Thurman is my brother. He is Tony Thurman threw me my first birthday party. He was a mentor of mine the whole time I was coming up. We do not agree on education stuff all the time, but I love him. I love his children. And yeah, man, I don't do the name calling. I have no issue with people being critical because David is critical and rightfully so, and he brings up receipts, and I never say anything to him about it, and I never will. But Will, you can't just be calling my brother all kind of names. That is my brother that I love very much. We don't have the same mom and dad, but he is I don't have very many friends, but he's one of my favorite people. But I just would say it's gonna be really interesting, man. I know that was long-winded because California's weird and our school boards are weird. But you know, we got to give Texas some more love in here, man. Because
Omar's got to go. I want to hear. I know Omar's got some stuff, but you just said some really important things. So I want to just close out like what I was thinking, and then I'm going to turn it over to Omar. You're right, Charles. The Republican Party is changing quickly. You wouldn't recognize it 20 years ago from what it is today. I think the Democratic Party, one of the challenges is you have this infrastructure where if you want to be a national Democratic leader, you have to go through this, like, again, local ground up, process, right? And it takes a lot of time, where the Republicans are moving people to the front of the line very quickly, right? Whether you like them or not. And so as a result, what we've seen is this very, like in the last 2 years, shift to a Republican platform that is not centered around, but is some of their core values are around anti-LGBTQ, anti like sex education and awareness in schools, and anti-CRT, right? Not just school board members, but congressional and presidential. It's obviously now a big issue, whether it is real or not. It's an issue they're pushing. And so you do have this group called Moms for Liberty that is within the year and a half have gotten very organized. In the last year and a half, they have 100,000 members across 240 chapters in 42 states. And in this recent election, they backed and ran 270 school board candidates in this country on that specific platform. So it's real, it's out there, it's going to impact children. We got to pay attention to this stuff.
Remember, I know Omar, damn, but just David,
he's dying.
Remember when people used to just be so worried about Go Public Schools and they 3 candidates? These motherfuckers ran 270.
The good old days. The good old
days. Your 3 candidates. Oh my God, the world is ending. Do we have the numbers of how many of those candidates out of the 271?
No, but I don't know. But many. I'll tell you that. Like similar to, I think at least of that number, you could say the 30 that DeSantis endorsed, most of them won. So they're making traction, and they've only just started. So
that's crazy.
Pay attention.
Yeah. Omar, it's all you, bro. The closer, you got us, man.
Sorry, man.
No, hey, man, listen. This is the whole point of the podcast. There's never an apology needed when y'all are off on a kick-ass beat and doing really well. I don't need the spotlight. I don't need to talk. Y'all doing a badass job. It's the point of the South Star Classroom, ladies and gentlemen. That means you're getting quality ass consulting work from 3 insanely capable people. We may be growing it soon.
And 1 supermodel.
Look, hey, I mean, I don't know about that, but listen.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
I think you all hear. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The beard of knowledge, supermodel, David Castillo.
Absolutely.
Coming at you. Coming at you. Coming at you, man. You never know. There's 3 big takeaways that I'm taking away from what you all just said that I think our audience maybe would really resonate with. The first is listen, midterm elections are sneaky as hell. They come up, no one pays a lot of attention to them, but it's not just the fact that you're in a fight for the control of the federal government. This is where they sneak in all of those down ballot folks, your state senators, your state representatives, your school board members. And if y'all aren't paying attention and you're just this is a midterm, I'm not going to come out and vote. If you're Republican, that's taxes. A good thing. A lot of referendums coming up. Yeah. It's just a sneaky time because people know that you're not going to come out and vote in those midterms. So they sneak all those folks in. And that has been the Republican strategy since Tom DeLay, 20 years before the 1990s. That is how long the Republicans have seen this long game of being we're going to put into all these local offices, the judges, the school board members, your state reps, your state senators. We're just going to fill the brim because that's where the most amount of things happen, is in those state houses, is in those school boards. And if you're not paying attention, you're getting it filled with what I can honestly say now is a menagerie of ridiculous ass mofos. And look, I'm a political science cat. I'm a public policy cat. The Republican Party of 30 years ago, do I think that they were really good people? No, not really. In terms of your top seated people, do I think Reagan was a great guy? People love to celebrate Reagan. He was an abject racist and he was a horrible person when it came to the economy. So everyone's the economy was great. Hell no, that was the greatest recession that we had since the Great Depression. Read a history book. Reagan was a disaster for the middle class. He was a horrible human being. But what I can say, and this is my second big takeaway, the Republican Party of the past is not the Republican Party of today. I don't know who the hell these people are. They don't have a platform. Their platform is whatever the Democrats are doing is evil and socialist. Get rid of CRT. Get rid of the Democrats. I don't know what the hell they stand for. There is no platform. They're not the government, or excuse me, the party of low government. Trump expanded the size of the federal government 3-fold. They're not the party of decreasing taxes and decreasing the debt. Trump did the exact opposite. They're not the party of fiscal conservatism. They don't even know what the hell that means anymore. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert don't understand page 1 of an economics book or page 1 of economic fiscal, fiscal conservatism, least of all how to speak English correctly. So you've got a Republican Party that has gone insanely off the rails, but their messaging is really good. And they are capturing people on the messaging, which is fear this, fear that. We're not going to do this. We're the Democrats are going to change the the gender of your kid and teach you that racism was all about white people in the first grade. And it's just like, Democratic Party, get your shit together, because you're losing the messaging game. And had Roe v. Wade not gotten overturned by a conservative court, mind you, this would have been the bloodbath. This would have been the Republican bloodbath everyone expected it to be. The October surprise was that overturn of Roe. So you need to pay attention, everyone, all of us, me included, need to pay attention to midterm elections and those down ballot candidates, and who are they and what are they trying to do and what does that mean for you, your community, and your school board. 2, this Republican Party is nuts. And they're going to be pulling some fast ones in 2014. And people need to start asking some very hard questions of these Republicans, which is, what is your policy stance on the economy? And if you're just going to lower taxes, how is that going to help the economy in general? Is it just going to help me in the short term? How is that? Because like all those people that are like, yeah, they're going to lower taxes, they welcome to inflation. How's that tax break going now when you got to pay all that shit in inflation costs? General economic knowledge goes a very, very long way. 3rd, make no assumptions, man. Everyone thought the Republicans were going to kick ass, and this abortion thing swept the tide.
Yeah, man.
You have 2 governors that changed political party in a midterm election. That's insane. You have the Senate that didn't overturn itself completely. We're still waiting on results, but that's also insane. And then the division in the House isn't as big as everyone thought it was going to be. So make no assumptions, and you've got to critically think through things. And this is ultimately what we're trying to say on the South Star Classroom. We are here to help you with some of those decisions. We are here to help you think through things, not just your school board, but your school policies, things that are happening in your community. Hire us, because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this is how things like from the president to the Senate, to the House, to the school board, to us, affect you on a daily basis. And we're happy as hell to talk about it. And you just got a wealth of knowledge from the beard of knowledge and from the real doctor himself, Dr. Charles Cole, man. There's a hell of a program.
I don't know if I need to close it out, but that was Omar. On this side is Omar. Over there is David. I'm Charles, and we will see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad station. I actually will be in Philadelphia with our brother Sharif at the Black Educator Male Expo. I think I'm saying the wrong conference. Yes, but I'm very, very happy to be there and to support my brother. But David and Omar will be holding it down, and we might have a very, very special guest for you in my stead. So make sure you tune in, share this, like this. We need your help. Give the comments and share with your people. Cut it up, and we'll do that if you need us to. But let's get this message out there, and we will see you all next time. Peace.